Welcome back to I Got Board Game.
Woo!
I got board game.
Got board games.
Yeah.
It's Friday.
Friday.
Though you're watching this, probably not on Friday.
And so I am Ben,
And I'm John.
and today we are here to review a small game that can play a lot of people, but pretty clever.
Mhm.
It's a flip and write, so kind of a different branch off from roll and write games. And that game is
The Beatles board game.
The Beatles and the Crossing the Street.
Yep.
Abbey Road. Is that what it's called?
Yep. Abbey Road. I was gonna be like, do you know what it's called?
The game is Avenue,
Avenue.
not Abbey Road or the Beatles. Avenue.
Well, I guess the title is cut off, but whatever.
Look at that! Look at that happy guy though. The happy farmer guy.
Happy worker.
So Avenue is a game published by Aporta Games for 1 to 10 players, but technically I think you can play with almost as many players as you want. And it says it plays in 15 minutes, maybe a little longer, I'd say, maybe like 20 minutes. But yeah, not too bad. And so to give you an idea of how the game works, I'll give you a quick overview, not everything, mainly just pointing out the interesting rules along with the overall structure of the game. So let me switch over to an image of the game. Kind of in progress. It's also kind of showing one player sheet, so you could technically play this solo, I guess. But I don't know if there actually is rules for like how to compare your score or such. But anyways, getting into how the game plays, the overall idea is that as a flip and write, like flip and write, not saying any bad words, the way it works is you have a deck of cards that are road cards over here, and this is the back side, and a small deck, just 6 cards that are farm cards. And so at the beginning of the game, you're going to give everyone their own sheet that looks like this without all the writing on it. It'd be blank. But all the sheets are with the same configuration and same spaces for writing and such. You'll shuffle the 2 decks separately, and then you'll begin by flipping over one of the farm cards. And so there are 5 rounds of the game as indicated by these yellow slots here on the sheet. And so basically for the first farm that's flipped, you're going to fill it in that first spot. And for successive ones, you'll fill it in the next spot. And what that is indicating is that you'll be scoring points for that lettered farm in that round. And what that means is throughout the game, you're going to then flip over these road cards one at a time and then drawing that road shape direction anywhere on your own sheet. And you're going to need to basically draw one road in that given farm for the round and then link it with other roads that you draw to other grapes. And so then at the end of the round, which happens after 4 yellow road cards have been flipped, you're going to score however many grapes your road goes through that also connects to the farm that was flipped for that round. And so that'll basically be the whole round. The other option you get on your turn is that instead of drawing the route once per round, you can not draw and choose to look at the next farm. So you'll see what farm is going to be scored in the next whole round. But yeah, so like I said, you'll flip one farm, keep flipping and then drawing these roads on your own sheet. Every player will do that until 4 yellow ones have been flipped. Then you finish and score that round and write it in on your sheet for that farm. And then you'll flip the next farm and then discard all the roads that were previously drawn, so those aren't shuffled back in. And then you'll start flipping one at a time, draw that road, flip another one, draw that road, trying to connect berries again to the next farm. And you can even connect 2 previous roads that you've drawn through the previous farm. So that's a way to get more points, to count berries again, basically, that you've already connected to. And you'll continue this for 5 rounds, which are the 5 farms. So 1 farm is not used in the game. And then what's important with the scoring too is that between each round, right? You'll have one farm that you're scoring for the first round, then another one. But each successive round, you have to score higher than your previous round, or else you'll get a 0, like this player wrote in here for farm B, that third round. But a 0 at the game is actually, as shown down here in the red box, a -5 points. So not only do you not get points for that round, because you scored less than your previous round, you'll actually lose points at the end of the game. So each round you have to score higher than your previous round to keep increasing points. And then at the end of the whole game, after the 5 rounds, you'll add up the points you got for each farm at that point, plus 1 point for every red grape that you connected to the red or pink castle, which is in the bottom left corner, and every green grape you actually drew a road to connecting to the green castle in the top right corner. Add all those points up, -5 for every round you got 0, and that's your final score. And that's how you play Avenue.
Yep.
So yeah, pretty simple general idea. When you're actually playing it, if you couldn't imagine how it actually works, it really is just that flipping and then drawing that path. And then everyone does that at the same time. So everyone's taking the same number of turns. And why I said this game could play basically any number of players is because you just give everyone a sheet, right? So however many sheets you have, you can have that many players. And then you just flip one card and everyone's drawing at the same time and trying to get the most points with their routes through the grapes and the farms. So with that, going to our thoughts on the game. John, your thoughts on Avenue.
So yeah, start off with positives. It's a very simple game. I think it's obviously, I think it's very easy for people to pick up because literally all you're doing is drawing in your lines into the game for each of the roads. It's not a very complicated process to learn. And I think it's also cool as a flip and write in the sense that there is some slight strategy involved. I think, as Ben mentioned, it's not just as simple as, oh, I see something, I have to draw it. Because as he mentioned, there is an opportunity for you to choose to not draw a road, to be able to both look at the upcoming card, and it also gives you an opportunity to not maybe use a road that you really don't want to draw in right now into the game, right? So it gives you a little bit of variance to the gameplay itself, but obviously you can't skip all the time. But yeah, I'd say like just kind of initially on that front, it's very nice in that way of not being super complicated, of a game for people to just kind of jump right into. And I think it's also really great because it can play, as Ben was kind of saying here, you can play with as many people as you want in the game, right? Like it's really nice to have a game that doesn't have a limitation to the amount of people that are playing, which is sometimes, when you're doing your board game nights or playing with friends and deciding what do you want to play. Sometimes you're limited by the number of people you have, whether it's a lot of people or even not that many people, right? Like trying to decide a game. This is a game that you can easily and always pick up to play.
So yeah, I mean, the pros that I would add to that are more from how like it's produced. And so this is like the pad of sheets you get. So you get a lot, which is a plus for a roll and write game because you need a lot if the game is going to continue to be playable. Also, it's colored, where, I mean, that's pretty common nowadays, but like older roll and writes, would be really simple things. Like you can even imagine like bingo, you've played in all different ways. People probably just print it out black and white, however, and play a simple game. But to have a game that's producing the sheet in color is nice. Focus.
Not focused.
Anyways, and actually, but something really nice about the sheet too, aside from the color, is that I really like how they have the reference down here, of the different road shapes and directions, basically, right? It's all corresponding to numbers. So every one card that's in the deck is this shape of path, and every 2 is that, and every 3 is that. But it's just easy to see because people are going to be sitting around the game, and so when you flip the card, it can look like a certain shape or direction to them, but they have the reference so that you're all drawing the same shape onto your sheet. And so it's nice to have that down there. And I think even kind of a little more of a thought on it as a flip and right that's interesting is aside from in not being a roll and write, it's not completely random, right?
Mhm.
It's not like you can roll like this path, all like the number one path, like tons of times in a row. Like theoretically, that's possible in a roll in right? If it was just rolling a die and each number corresponded to the path. But being a flip and right, in that the road cards are used and then discarded from the game, it means there's a certain number of each road, and it's evenly distributed. I think it's 7 of each of the 6 paths. But then eventually you might kind of bank on that, and push your luck a little of like, I really need this shape because I drew my path this way, so I'm really hoping the next 5 path
Mhm.
will show up now. And then along with that, then I do also like what you pointed out, John, that you have the option to not draw once per round or per farm, and you can look at the next farm, but you can only do that once. So I do like how the game forces you to draw
Mhm.
basically eventually, right?
Mhm.
Even if it's a path that you don't need at the time, you'll probably, especially if it happens early on. I think it's
Yeah.
funny because it's like, will I need this? Like, I'm gonna guess that I'm gonna maybe need this here or try to build around it being here. Where then later in the game, you're probably like, I'm just going to shove this into a corner that leads nowhere because I
Mhm.
really don't need this at the end of the game.
Yeah.
But I think those are kind of funny situations where you're just kind of putting it randomly, but then it is
Mhm.
kind of messing up your chances of getting it later if you actually need it.
Yeah, and there has been circumstances when we've played the game where it's like, I guess I'm gonna draw this horizontal line here, and then later on you realize, no, why did I draw horizontal? I should have left it for a vertical or something, right? Like it's just really funny sometimes to see what people do as you're going through it. I was gonna say another thing that I like that's clever about the game is the fact that the rounds, like the points, the way that you score, is set up in a way where it's not just like you always score and you always just get a certain amount of points, but that there is this sense of required progression in the game in a way, in a weird way, where like if you do want to do well in the game, or like if you want to get a higher score, like the expectation is you have to be adding more great value or total score value per farm, right? It's where maybe in some games, every round when you score, they're kind of independent of each round, right? Each round just kind of scores by itself. But in this game, where each round is dependent on the previous round in some capacity, of the fact that you have to be, if you want to make points, you have to do a higher score than the previous one because it changes how you'd want to draw your paths. Because if you maybe jump into the game, you're thinking, oh, if I just, every time a new round comes up, I'm just going to connect, a couple of grapes to a particular farm just so that I know I'm always making points. But it's like, oh, well, if early on in the round, let's say the first round, you scored pretty high. Let's say maybe you got like a score of like 8 grapes, which is great. But then the second round is a different farm, and you're like, I feel like I can only connect like 3 grapes, then it's like you're in trouble because then you're not going to make points on that round for that. But it's also interesting because if you score 0, let's say on that round, that means the next round after that, because your last round was a 0, you can now score whatever amount of points you want. So even if you fall behind or you miss a round, let's say, it's not like you're locked out of continuing in the game. It just means for that particular round, unfortunately, you didn't score anything. But like your paths are still there and you can still score for the next round any amount of points at that point. So
Yeah, I think that kind of scoring part is also what adds an interesting kind of push your luck to the game. Like I don't think the game is categorized really as push your luck, but there is that sense of, you might eventually, once you start understanding that little part about the scoring of always needing to do better, then you might play a game where you'll score a bit the first round and you'll be like, okay, I just need one more point this round. So you maybe like continue that same route, hopefully getting to the next farm and just getting 1 point more. But then maybe if you easily get that 1 point more, you're like, oh, there's still roads this round. Maybe I'll keep extending it to more points. And then you'll see about third round if you can maybe do 1 more point or you kind of mess yourself up or something like that.
But and that's the thing. It's like it depends on what you draw for the roads too, right? Like as the game is progressing, like what is being drawn, because it's like, okay, maybe I could add one more point, or maybe I'm like, oh, with the roads that were just drawn, like I can add like 4 or 5 points more than the previous one, which technically I'm already fine, but I can push to get more points this round. But then if you do that, once the roads are drawn, they're stuck. It's not like you can go back and erase your roads, later on. Like they're permanently there. So
yeah,
then
and
if you
that's
draw
actually
your
that's important to point out. Yeah, you can't draw over roads that you drew already, and you definitely can't
there's
erase
no
them.
way, there's no like reset, there's no secret card or special powers that you let you get rid of card or roads drawn or whatever. It's like once it's there, it's there. That's it. You can't do anything else about it. And so maybe the way that the road is drawn, it's like, okay, it can get you the extra 3 or 4 points, but it kind of like blocks itself off or something, right? And it's kind of one of those questions you have to ask yourself: is it worth the risk for you, for me, or for you as a player to block it off, right? To get that extra like 4 or 5 points, right? Which sometimes maybe it is, but then sometimes maybe it isn't.
Yeah, and I think with that too, like that system or mechanism that adds to that well is the idea that there are 6 farms in the game, but only 5 of them are used per game. So then there's always that idea of also kind of pushing your luck, but you could also use an action to look at the final farm card. But obviously earlier on, you'll only be able to see the next farm, so you don't know the ones after that, for planning purposes. And so the fact that one farm is always not used, there's that little bit of like pushing your luck of like, I'm drawing the routes and this is getting toward the end of the game because we're on, like the 4th farm. It's like, I'm hoping the last farm is not this one. Obviously, yeah, like I said, you could look, but then there's also a sense sometimes, maybe, I don't know if it's me as a gamer or something, it's like, I can't sacrifice a road to look. I need all the roads,
because because one of the ways you think about it is like the roads are the ways that you get points in the game too, right? Like if you don't build a road, that's a road that's not going into one of the grape spaces, which means you're not getting points. So there is that of like, oh, you're sacrificing the option of getting more points. But conversely, it's the information of like, well, if you drew the road in, but you drew it to the wrong farm, especially for the end game, then it's like, well, okay, great, you drew a bunch of roads, but now you're scoring 0 points because you can't connect that road anymore.
So it probably, at the point that I was describing, it's probably worth looking at the last farm.
Exactly.
Just so you guys know. But I think also actually on that point, it is also interesting that I think pretty typical to roll and writes is that there isn't an order that you need to necessarily be filling in. Like certain ones obviously have like a hierarchy of order to fill the boxes in, but in Avenue, like you're drawing your route anywhere that's available. And so I think that's also kind of a nice there's a nice freedom to the game in that way, right? Where it's like, don't think that you have to, once you drew one path, you have to keep continuing from there. You don't. You can predict and try to draw a road somewhere else and just start anywhere. You can mess yourself up doing that too, but it's kind of nice, right? It kind of, in a sense, prevents you from feeling so stuck of like only be able to draw in one of 2 directions each time.
Yeah.
And you can even do multiple paths if you really want to.
Yeah. And I think one of the other cool things about the game too is, especially when you play in a multiplayer setting or with other people, the end of the game, you get to see what everybody else has drawn to. I think that's also a really fun aspect of this game of like, or as the course of the game is developing, you kind of peek over at somebody like, what? Why are you drawing like that? That's so weird. Or like someone will look at yours and you're like, yeah, I'm not scoring anything this round.
yeah. When people say that, it's just like, oh, that sucks. That sucks. Because that's a really fun you would want to avoid, right? You mainly want to avoid 0. Even if you do what I said of like 1 more point than last round, that's still pretty good.
Because that means you're always scoring. Because I don't know if we said it or you saw it on the page when Ben was showing it, but you get, not only do you get 0 points when you score a 0, you also get a penalty for having a 0 in the scoring.
Of minus
You actually get a
Five.
-5. It's
Focus.
not
Anyways, it's here. It's
but yeah.
that red box.
So not only do you get a
Dang it.
0, you get a -5 to your score. So it's kind of a double whammy of you're actively losing points at that point, which is not ideal. So
And so yeah, I think the last small thing I can think of that's a pro is this. Oh, actually, two things. I still remember. One is the production, which I should have said less, but it's a small box, right? And the sheet fits perfectly. The stack of sheets. It's basically a one-page folded rules and cards. Maybe it comes with a Ziploc bag. I don't know, but basically just you could put all the cards together, and that's everything that fits in the game. And so this box could actually technically be even slightly smaller, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's a nice shape. It's a nice size. So very easy to open up, pull everything out, get set up. But then the other thing, going back to the scoring, was the game including the pink and green castles. Because I think that does add something else you can plan for, right? Where you can include it in your roads that you're already building to the farms so that you're counting the red and green grapes that you're already drawing through. So it's kind of another nice consideration so that the game is not so straightforward as just the route you drew through the farms, but it's like, oh, there's this other two other things basically you can go out of your way for to try to include, and that can help you get more points.
Yeah, and it's a nice addition to getting points outside of having the successively kind of larger scoring. It's that's just a one-time end of the game bonus that you as you're saying, like, it just maybe it happens that your roads are close enough that it's like, oh, you know what, maybe with my extra roads I can happen to build it over to that way so I can get the extra like 10 or 15 points or however many points that your road is connected to by the end of the game.
So yeah, so those are our pros, and now moving on to the cons, things that did not work as well with the game.
Yeah, so I think I'll start off with one. I think there can be, it's not too common in this game, I don't think it's a huge issue, but there can be some analysis paralysis that could come in the game. Very light, not a huge amount, but you don't move on in the round until the last player is drawn their road. So sometimes certain players, and myself, may take some time in thinking about the decision of how they want to draw their road or where they want to draw it. So in that way, it can drag on a little bit depending on how fast the players are in drawing the road. Again, it's not a huge gripe. I don't think we've encountered it that often, but it could happen, right? So like, let's say somebody is pretty fast at making their decision about where they want to draw the road, but they're playing with people who do not make their decisions as quickly. You have to wait until they draw that road. So a minor gripe, minor inconvenience, but it could happen with whatever group you might play with.
Gripe or grape? No, I'm just kidding.
A sour grape there.
I think the con I would mention, and this is also not too big against the game because it's kind of with the genre of roll and write and flip and write, is that these games can sometimes feel like you're playing on your own, right? Because you're not sharing necessarily a board with anyone or fighting over pieces or spots, right? You just have your own sheet that you're drawing on. No one else can interfere with that, and so you are kind of just going about this path drawing puzzle on your own, which then at the end of the game, as you mentioned, John, like, it's fun to then compare, but then through the game, you're actually not trying to, like, you don't want people to look at yours, or you shouldn't look at others to try to like copy each other, kind of a thing. So then it kind of comes down to how interactive the players are with their own kind of banter during the game, right? Of like, oh yes, that's exactly what I needed, or yeah, I don't know where to put this, but if no one's saying anything, it's really just gonna feel like your activity that you're doing on your own, but at the same time as everyone else.
Yeah, so in a weird way, it's almost like there's this weird element to this game where it actually, to keep it kind of fun or keep it from being too analytical of a game or too much of that puzzle solving, like there is a social dimension to the group that you're playing with where the banter does help kind of keep the game or keep kind of the spirit of the board game session or night going. If you're more of a social crowd or kind of like wanting to interact with players. So this is actually a great game for allowing for side conversations to happen, like as the game is progressing, right? Like there's no requirement, like the cards are flipped, and then as long as everyone sees the card or knows the card is announced. But yeah, I was gonna say that was gonna be my second negative on the game, is that it really is kind of a solo kind of experience, right? There, as you said, there's literally no direct interaction with other players in terms of the gameplay itself, right? I would say
and that's
Oh,
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, and that, like I mentioned, is common to roll and writes.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
some try to fix it, like some newer ones maybe try to make up for it by having goals that people are competing for, like who gets to something first, maybe is one way, but yeah, in general, that is kind of expected with, I think, roll and writes and flip and writes.
Mhm.
But yeah, sorry, you're gonna say.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say another. I don't think it's a negative. It's just a neutral more to the game, but it's there is a limit to the number of cards that there are. As we mentioned, there is an exact number of cards. So this is a game that if you play it enough times, even though there is the variability in the farms, it could feel like it gets somewhat repetitive, I would say, right? Like there's no, like the randomized elements of there being different farms and the selection of roads that come up is different, right? Every time you play it, because the way that you need to score, it tends to be different every single time. But that doesn't really change, right? Like the roads are always the same. It's always the same amount of roads. There's only one different farm. So there could be an element that if you've played the game enough and you're good at tracking and card counting in this game, you could find ways to game the system in that way.
Interesting.
It's doable. Again, that's why I don't say it's not a direct negative to the game. It's more of a neutral point. But especially for people who really like to game a system or learn a system of a board game, like you could probably master this one really quickly, and it may not be fun for other people if you become too much of a try hard compared to the other people who are playing. So just kind of a notation on that. Again, not a negative, it's more of a neutral point. But yeah, I would say like while this is a competitive game, this also isn't something that I would recommend for min-maxers of trying to play that way, because yeah, it's just interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess a neutral was also thinking was that, and this kind of comes up when I'm teaching the game, that each of the sheets are all laid out the same, with the same groups of in colors of grapes located in where they are and farms located where they are. And so again, this is neutral because I think people want it to be mixed up and have variety in the kind of layouts of the sheets. Like that's maybe kind of an inherent desire, but then when you also think about it, the game could easily not be balanced if it is switched up in certain ways, right? And so having everyone have the same sheet is more fair. And then it kind of comes down to how they draw the farm. So it just kind of cancels out, right? Like people maybe just like their initial reaction is like, oh, I wish it was varied. And it's like, oh no, but it wouldn't make sense if it is varied. So
it's typically what people think of is like when you see a board, you want variability within the board, but the variability isn't the board. The variability is the roads that are being drawn, right? Because effectively every game you play, you probably shouldn't be like it won't be drawing the same order of roads. So that is supposed to be kind of the mixing up of the board, let's say, right? Of that, in that respect. So
and I would say an actual, maybe a final con I do have is just more of the longevity of the game, how replayable it is. Like, of course, like the replayability of the roads coming up differently and how you draw it is like, as you just mentioned, is where that replayability lies. But then once you have the general strategy of the game down, spoilers, should I spoil it?
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so spoiler, the big strategy is you want to make like one big road that goes through all the farms so that you're continually counting each round the same grapes again, but then the new ones that you reached when connecting to the new farm for that round. So, that's how you can maybe like start a round, connect to the first farm and get like, I don't know, 7 points, and then continue from that through the next farm and add on 3 points. So you're getting like 10 points that round. Right. So
because it's cumulative.
yeah. So you're counting those grapes again. So, that is the big strategy, I would say, to the game. Just kind of how lucky you are in getting the farms in the order you need it to and the routes to draw it in that certain order. That comes, to that variability, that chance. But once you know that, then the game is kind of like what you're planning for becomes pretty straightforward through the whole game. And I think that's kind of, it's not bad because it's fun to figure out, especially in the beginning, if you did not listen to my spoiler about this strategy. But once you do, then each time you play, it's kind of like what you're going for, and that's essentially what everyone should be going for, I would say.
Yeah. And while that tends to be the general strategy, how it plays out still is pretty different. And I will say, like, as we've played we played this game a few times. People do draw it differently because people think about it in different ways. So you usually will not see people having the same exact kind of drawings, right? Because the grids are very large. And while you might know the upcoming farm, kind of the setup for the future farms, there's enough kind of differences in how you might be thinking about how to prepare yourself that people will strategize placing roads in different places. So that is the nice part of the game in that way, where that's why it's kind of more like, while it's kind of a con, it don't worry about it feeling like, oh, everyone's going to play the same way, right? Because you do have that. But actually, I was going to say, in terms of longevity, I would say that this is the kind of game that I'm not sure if you're playing like party games or like in a group setting. This is like, as we were saying, while there is variability to being able to replay this game multiple times, it almost feels like this may not be a game that people would want to play more than twice a night, kind of feeling like, because I think, as Ben was saying, for the type of game that it is, sometimes it can feel like it's longer than what it should be, almost, of like this, we're drawing all these roads, it's great, we're trying to connect all these roads and score our points, but for 5 rounds. So it's a lot of rounds to do it, which is good because you do want to get a decently high score. If it ended in like a 3 or 4 rounds, you probably really wouldn't be drawing that many roads. So 5 rounds is appropriate for the amount of scoring that you do and the size of the grid. It's just that if you were to play the game twice in a row, it might feel like by the end of the second game, if you were thinking about doing a third game of it on the same night, it might feel a little long for people, right? Or it's like, again, and I think it's mainly because, as we said, it's a roll and write game where the game itself doesn't really have a lot of appeal for player interaction, right? So like, if I'm getting together for a board game night, kind of that thought of like, I kind of want to interact with other people, right? That's why I'm there for the board game night, right? Usually, unless I guess you're a hardcore and like puzzle solver.
Yeah, you meet up to play solo games.
Yeah. So maybe that's your cup of tea. Maybe this could be the game for you, right? For playing that style. But if not, then that could be just know that this is something that, again, I mean, but it's kind of the nature of the game. It's a light game. It's not expected to be like a gripping, hours long fest of playthroughs over and over and over again kind of game.
So with that, we will go on to our rating, and John guesses the weight. So John, what is your rating first for Avenue?
Yeah, so I would say overall, I think it's a solid game. I think it's a fun, just casual game for people to play, easy for anybody to get into. But as I mentioned before, I think in terms of multiple playthroughs feeling, or at least on a regular, like on a single night session, like a board game night session and stuff, and for the strategy generally being that there really is typically only one significant strategy that really exists in the game once you've played it. I think my rating for this game is probably a 6.5 out of 10. Not a bad game. I think this is a solid game that if you were interested in just picking something up that's really easy, really casual, that you could just, literally almost literally pull out of your pocket with the size of the box. Easy to pick up. You could even literally probably just carry like the cards and like the stack of the paper, the grid papers. Like you don't even need the box. Like you could literally just bring those two things and that's all you need.
But the box is so pretty.
Box is nice and it's small, so that's all right. You probably don't need to just carry that, but like it's that simplistic, right? From a footprint, like the board game footprint. It's a very light, small game. But yeah, I give it a 6.5 because I don't think it's ultimately super gripping in the sense of other board games that I think are rated higher in terms of replayability, complexity, interest for people. Like from a competitive standpoint, it feels a little longer for a casual game than I'd say other casual games of a similar vein are like. It could be the fact of the way that flip and right games are, but it's still not a bad game, right? 6.5 is still a reasonably high score of I would be willing to play it if it was something that people wanted to play. It just may not be my initial recommendation for myself, but I would be down if other people would be wanting to play. So,
and so the weight that you think the game is
1.08.
the weight to win a copy of Avenue.
I'm gonna say 1.08.
1.08. Okay, so
feels like a super simple game. I'm like, I don't know how less complicated you could get than this.
So before I show my Board Game Geek page with my score, I will explain my score. I think I do like the game, and I think part of my rating for it is that it did charm me in kind of being a game from a small publisher, Aporta Games, which I think has generally gotten good reviews, just maybe not well known and only has maybe a handful of games published. But I think part of the charm was that it's this small game, very simple to set up, small footprint. Like I really do like how if we choose to play this on game night, just open the box, rip everyone a sheet, give them a pencil, and it's like, okay, we can play. And so I really like that setup to it. And then I do also really like how the rules there are those unique elements to it that add to what you would think a game like this would be, which is mainly like the needing to score higher each round and that you're kind of drawing paths anywhere to try to get the points that you think is the best way. I think those two elements are what made it seem so interesting and clever to me, versus just thinking it would be a game where you have to continue the route the same way and you're just going to keep scoring whatever points you get each round, right? So it's definitely more clever than something like that than I expected. And the art is great, even though that's the only art you get, this box cover art. I think it's cute and really welcoming. And then I think with what John was saying, though, with the replayability, it is something that I wouldn't like want to play all the time, right? Just like that initial time of like teaching people on a game night is fun. And so then we kind of have some laughs and compare how we did things. But then, aside from playing it once or twice a night, I don't need to play it that much. And so my score is... Actually, let me see if I can share. A 7.
7.
So more than John by a little bit.
Yep.
Because I think, like I was mentioning, part of that score is the charm it had for me in showing me how a small game can be clever and different from what I expected. And it just has that welcoming look to it. And it's simple and clean. No rules ambiguity, right? Like you draw this shape route, right? It's not, there aren't these questions of like, can I draw it here or here? It's like, it's
can
clear.
I flip
yes
it? Can I rotate it?
Yeah, can I rotate it? Like flip it? It's like, no, you have to draw it the way it is. No drawing over where you did other ones. There you go. And then like really clean rules. And so a 7 from me. And then the weight, 1.4, John.
I know. I need to get my weight distribution of board games kind of restarted.
Admittedly, though, I think 1.4 is a little high. I don't think what you said. I would think, yeah, more maybe in between, like a 1.
Maybe like 1.2 or something.
Yeah. But 1.4 seems a little high. But yeah, that is our review of Avenue. Hope you guys get to check out the game again by a small publisher. So supporting them would be great. I think they do good games that have gotten good reviews. And so if you found this review helpful, I hope you'll share it with friends, family, people you play board games with. Hope you'll consider subscribing to this YouTube channel and even following on Instagram at I Got Board Game. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.